Hello, welcome back to the Cosmic Consciousness series. If you know, you know. And if you really know, drop a like and a subscribe at the bottom, and welcome to the unity, baby. Today we'll be talking about Chapter 7 on the case of Bartolomé Las Casas. The one, the only. Yes. He was born in 1474, died in 1566. One of the most remarkable men of the 16th century, they say. Las Casas was the brightest star of the small constellation, i.e. the early Spanish Americans. With the eye of a seer he saw, and in the words of a prophet, he foretold the judgment that would fall upon Spain for the horrors perpetrated on the wretched Aborigines. Okay, so this goes back to before the Americans arrived. Bartolomé de las Casas was born in Seville in 1474. His family, one of the noblest in Spain, was of French origin, descended from the Viscounts of Limoges. They were already in Spain before the 13th century and played a distinguished part in the conquest of Seville from the Moors by Ferdinand III of Castile in 1252. From that time forward, members of the family were to be found in positions of trust, and among their marked traits of character were invincible courage and spotless integrity. By birth and training, Bartolomé was an aristocrat to the very tips of his fingers. Las Casas went to Hispaniola and settled on an estate in that island in 1502. Okay, let's get into the good stuff. Little is known of his first occupation there, except that he seems to have been more or less concerned in money-making like all the other settlers. About 1510, he was ordained as a priest. He fulfilled 3 or 4 vocations, being an eager man of business, a laborious and accurate historian, a great reformer, a great philanthropist, and a vigorous ecclesiastic. He was eloquent, acute, truthful, bold, sacrificing, and pious. He was one of the lives that are beyond biography and require a history to be written in that order to illustrate them. So wait, you're telling me that he was rich and an aristocrat, but he was also a really well-known, well-respected man in his community? Didn't we talk about how uneasy that is to be able to like ascend into your true self? Having all those other things like money and stuff weighing you down? But, okay, so his career affords perhaps a solitary instance of a man who, being neither a conqueror, a discoverer, nor an inventor, has, by the pure force of benevolence, become so notable a figure that large portions of history cannot be written, or at least cannot be understood, without the narrative of his deeds and efforts being made one of the most principal threads upon which the history is strung. So he's automatically in contrast to Buddha and Jesus and those other gods behind. But he has the same traits, does he? In early American history, Las Casas is undoubtedly the principal figure. He has been justly called, the great apostle of the Indies. He was a person of such immense ability and strength of character that in whatever age of the world he had lived, he would undoubtedly have been one of its foremost men. As a man of business, he had rare executive power. He was a great diplomatist and an eloquent preacher, a man of titanic energy, ardent but self-controlled, of unconquerable tenacity, warm-hearted and tender, calm in his judgments, shrewdly humorous, absolutely fearless and absolutely true. He made many and bitter enemies, and some of them were unscrupulous enough, but I believe no one has ever accused him of any worse sin than extreme fervor of temperament. His wrath would rise to a white heat, and indeed there was occasion enough for it. He was also very apt to call a spade and to proclaim unpleasant truths with pungent emphasis. Wow, that's bold, huh? By the year 1510, the slavery of the Indians under the names repartimientos and encumpiendas, a Spanish term, encumpiendas, had become deplorably cruel. So this was a slur, okay? An Indian's life was counted of no value. It was cheaper to work an Indian to death and get another than to take care of him, and accordingly the slaves were worked to death without mercy. Oh. From time to time they rose in rebellion, then they were slaughtered by the hundreds, burned alive, impaled on sharp stakes, and torn to pieces by bloodhounds. Jeez. Las Casas was by natural endowment a many-sided man who looked at human affairs from various points of view Under other circumstances, he need not necessarily have developed into a philanthropist. That is such a hard word to say. Philanthropist, though any career into which he might have been drawn could not have failed to be honorable and noble. At first, he seems to have been what one might call worldly minded. But the most interesting thing about him we shall find to be his steady intellectual and spiritual development. From year to year, he rose to higher and higher planes of thought and feeling. He was at first a slave owner, like the rest, and had seen no harm in it. But from the first, his kindly, sympathetic nature asserted itself, and his treatment of his slaves was such that they loved him. He was a man of striking and easily distinguishable aspect, and the Indians in general, oh, they put a period there. I don't know why. The Indians in general, who fled from the sight of a white man, came soon to recognize him, Las Casas, as a friend who could always be trusted. Wow. Okay. About 1512 to 13, Velasquez conquered Cuba, reducing the natives to slavery. Las Casas presently followed him into the island and received from him a half interest in a large village of Indians. He entered in possession as a mere matter of course and settled down in the island. We come now to the definite fact which, if it can be relied upon as having happened as told, proves, along with the facts of his life, that Las Casas was a case of cosmic consciousness. Not only so, but it would seem from his supreme physical and mental vigor, prolonged to a great age, from his splendid moral nature, from his intellect, said to be proved by his writings to the first class, from his personal magnetism and from his high spiritual endowments, that this man stands among the supreme examples of those who have been endowed with this splendid faculty. It was the duty of Las Casas to say Mass, and now and then to preach, and in thinking of his sermon for Pentecost in 1514, he opened his Bible, and his eyes alighted upon these verses, according down here, in the 34th chapter of Ecclesiasticus. The Most High is not pleased with the offerings of the wicked, neither is he pacified for sin by the multitude of sacrifices. The bread of the needy is their life, that he defraudeth him thereof is a man of blood. He that taketh away his neighbor's living slayeth him, and he that defraudeth the laborer of his hire is a shedder of blood. As he reads these words, a light from heaven seemed to shine upon Las Casas. The scales fell from his eyes. He saw that the system of slavery was wrong in principle. At this time, Las Casas was 40 years of age. Fisk goes on to tell how for 52 more years he lived one of the most active, beautiful, and beneficent of lives, dying at last in Madrid after a few days' illness at the age of 92. So he was the oldest one out of all these cases. In all this long and arduous life, except for a moment, perhaps, on the crushing news of the destruction of his colony upon the Pearl Coast, we find no record of work interrupted by sickness, and to the very last his sight was not dim, nor his natural force abated. Fisk concludes, in contemplating such a life as that of Las Casas, all words of eulogy seem weak and frivolous. The historian can now only bow in reverent awe before a figure which is in some respects the most beautiful and sublime in the annals of Christianity since the apostolic age. When now and then in the course of the centuries God's providence brings such a life into this world, the memory of it must be cherished by mankind as one of its most precious and sacred possessions. For the thoughts, the words, the deeds of such a man there is no death. The sphere of their influence goes on widening forever. They bud, they blossom, they bear fruit from age to age. As Las Casas wrote, evidence more or less decisive on the point here raised should be found under his own hand. But most of his compositions were short and were occupied with special and current topics. The work in which, if at all, he may have touched upon the supposed event in his personal history is titled Historia General de la Indias, and this unfortunately has never been printed. At his death, he left it to the convent of San Gregorio at Valladolid, with directions that it should not be printed for 40 years, nor be seen during that time by any layman or member of the fraternity. The Royal Academy of History revised the first volume some years since with a view of the publication of the whole work, but the indiscreet and imaginative style of the composition, according to Navarrete, and the consideration that his most important facts were already known through the other channels, induced that body to abandon the design. Okay. With deference to their judgment, it seems to me a mistake. Las Casas, with every deduction, is one of the great writers of the nation, great from the important truths which he discerned when none else could see them, and with the courage with which he proclaimed them to the world. They are scattered over his history as well as his other writings. They are not, however, the passages transcribed by Herrera, whoever that is. It is a fair inference from the above remarks that the writings of Las Casas have the qualities usually found in those which proceed from cosmic consciousness, such as boldness, originality, keen insight, sympathy, courage. And over and above these, it is quite possible that were they examined, they would be found to contain proof by direct statement that their author possessed the cosmic sense. To sum up, Las Casas was presumably possessed of cosmic consciousness because A, of his unusual health and strength, for this great faculty commonly occurs in exceptional physical organizations. B, of his striking aspect and of the affection felt for him by the Indians and others. C, of his mental growth after the age at which the intellectual and moral stature is usually complete. D, of the sudden and immense change that took place in him at the age of 40, when he was past the period of moral evolution within the compass of the ordinary self-conscious man. E, because of the intellectual, but especially of the moral stature attained by him higher, it may safely be said, than is ever attained within the limits of mere self-consciousness. And F, and because of, if it can be depended upon, and it seems so likely that it is easy to believe, the subjective light said to have been experienced by him about Pentecost 1514. If this could be shown to be of the same character as the light that shone within Paul, Mohammed, and others, then it would be certain that Las Casas possessed the cosmic sense, wouldn't it? Even as the case stands, there is little doubt of it. It must not be forgotten that the supposed subjective light was the immediate forerunner of Las Casas's spiritual new birth, nor that this latter occurred at the characteristic time of year while he was thinking of his sermon for Pentecost, therefore toward the end of May or in early June. Thank you. I apologize for this video and the making of it. This guy, just had no idea and, what was going on. I apologize to you guys. This is in the book called Cosmic Consciousness. I have no idea of why it might be in. Oh yeah, you're right here. I have no idea why, but it just is, I guess. But just to give you a message of the day, Logos is the term for you to meditate on today. Logos, the power of your voice, the unification of your mind with your spiritual self, and the use and application thereof. Now go out there, my brothers, and manifest. Thank you.